Victoria from Biblio Lifestyle, and you're listening to the Reader's Couch podcast, the show that will help you bridge the gap between living a full and busy life to one where you're reading, learning new things, and having fun. Today on the couch, I'm so excited to welcome author Stephanie Wrobel to discuss her latest novel, The Hitchcock Hotel. In The Hitchcock Hotel, we meet Alfred Smettle, an ardent Alfred Hitchcock enthusiast who has transformed a secluded Victorian mansion into a themed hotel dedicated to the master of suspense. To celebrate the hotel's first anniversary, Alfred invites his former college film club friends for a weekend reunion. However, this gathering is more than a nostalgic trip down memory lane. It's a meticulously orchestrated event with a hidden agenda, as Alfred hasn't spoken to them in 16 years, not since a mysterious incident happened that changed their lives. As the weekend unfolds, long-buried secrets emerge, and the line between homage and horror starts to blur. Readers, you can expect a clever thriller that pays tribute to Alfred Hitchcock and his legacy, while also being filled with suspense, twist, and a chilling exploration of obsession and revenge. But before we get into the episode, please subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, leave the show a 5-star rating, and write me a review if you love the show. So, thanks in advance, and now onto the episode with author Stephanie Wrobel. Hi readers, welcome again to the Reader's Couch. I'm your host, Victoria Wood, and here on the couch with me to talk about her new novel, The Hitchcock Hotel, is author Stephanie Wrobel. Hi Stephanie, welcome to the Reader's Couch.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yay, I'm thrilled to have you on. Can't wait to talk about The Hitchcock Hotel. But this is your third novel. I know it's not your first rodeo, but how are you feeling now that this new novel is out and available?
Yeah, it's every time, to be honest, it's crazy no matter how many books you've published. And this one does feel a bit special because my first two came out during a pandemic. So this is the first time I'm actually going on book tour and out and about in the world. So it does in some ways feel like a debut of its own.
Yes, but I bet the conversations will be even more exciting because now this is the third book. So you'll have maybe fans from Darling Rose Gold, and This Might Hurt as well. So yes, it's going to be really exciting. I can't even imagine. Really cool.
Yeah, plenty to talk about.
Yes, lots to talk about. With that said, tell us about your new novel, The Hitchcock Hotel. What's the elevator pitch? And also, what can readers expect when they pick up this book?
Sure. So The Hitchcock Hotel is about a man named Alfred Smettle, who is a crazed sort of Hitchcock fanatic. And he decides to open this themed hotel in the White Mountains in New England. And he has these former best friends from college, 5 friends that were in a film club with him. And he hasn't spoken to any of them in 16 years because of something that happened during college. They had this big falling out. And so he decides on the first anniversary of the hotel's opening that he's going to invite these friends for an exclusive weekend, just the 6 of them. He's going to settle some scores that have been long brewing. And so they all show up and chaos ensues.
Yes, chaos ensues. But I want us to talk about this hotel first and foremost, because it almost felt like a character in the novel, especially with your detail. It just sounded, like a place I would love to go. So this is a Victorian house. It's in the beautiful White Mountains, which was very transported for me because I visited the White Mountains for the first time last year.
Really?
Yes, it was so fabulous. I love the energy there. I'd love to go back. So needless to say, I would go to Alfred's hotel, but it's filled with memorabilia. I can never say that word. Things about the films, movie props in every room. There's even lots of crows. That was interesting. Tell me about your inspiration for, first and foremost, the Hitchcock Hotel, the physical place that you wrote about in your novel.
Yeah, so when I first came up with this idea of a Hitchcock-themed hotel, I had to decide the size first and foremost. And I decided on more of a bed and breakfast versus hotel because idea of shutting down like a Hilton-sized hotel for 6 people is just ridiculous. So once I decided on it's actually more like a house that's been refashioned into a B&B, that gave me my structure of, okay, there's 2 floors of rooms and this is what it would look like. And then in terms of the exterior, I really wanted to model it on something within Hitchcock's work. So what I have in my mind is the Bates family house, which was informed by a painting by Edward Hopper. So it's actually my desktop on my laptop photo. So yeah, it's just this sort of very Victorian looking building on a hill, isolated, but also like you said, you have beautiful white mountains in the background. I set it in the fall because like, one, spooky season, and 2, just like the beautiful fall foliage. So I hope that it feels really atmospheric.
Yes, it felt atmospheric for me. And again, that's part of the reason why I was saying the hotel and the setting just felt like a character. I felt really immersed. Now, let's talk about Alfred, because he has quite a bit going on in his life for sure. He invites his friends. Now, it's fair to say the friends were from his university film club. They're there for a few days and they're 5 friends. So we have TJ, we have Samira, we have Grace, we have Zoe, and we have Julius. They've remained friends, but again, they all have their own dynamic, as you can expect within a friend group like that. So tell us a bit about each of them. You can start with Alfred. He's a host. He's hosting this at his hotel, and then get into the rest of them.
Sure. So yeah, Alfred is the host. He is the impetus for this whole thing coming together. And like you said, each character has their own secrets. Some of them are still friends and in contact. Others have fallen by the wayside. It's really interesting. This is the largest cast I've ever had. It's 7 points of view. And I was like, oh, how am I going to keep these straight in my own head, let alone then the reader's head down the road? And what I ended up doing was looking at the 7 deadly sins, which I've just randomly always been interested in, and using a sin to represent each character. So if you think about Zoe as this chef and someone who struggles with alcoholism, so gluttony was hers. And so I just gave each of them that, and that helped inform what their careers were, what their big personality flaws were. So we have TJ, who's the bodyguard, and he's just acting off the whole time, looking over his shoulder. We're wondering, what is this guy afraid of? Because he's this huge guy. He shouldn't have too much to fear, but he does. And then we've got Julius, who's one of my favorite characters to write. He's just this sort of trust fund baby whose grandfather founded this like very luxury fashion company. And so he really doesn't need to work. He was often bankrolling his friends' escapades, but he has his own issue going on, which I won't give any spoilers, but things that are making him maybe re-examine some of the ways he's acted in his life and how he wants to go forward. And then we have Samira, who I think is like the sort of the classic mom of the group, who's the most caring, who has probably the best intentions. She's going through a separation with her husband and has 2 children, but she also manages this really successful sex toy company. She is definitely the one who's always watching out for everyone, trying to promote harmony within the group. And then lastly, we have Grace, who is Alfred's longtime crush. She is a very successful, works in the finance industry, take no bullshit character. And she has the most secrets, I would say, besides Alfred. She was the last character that gets a point of view, and I think she's one probably the readers most want to hear from. I really tried to stagger the points of view so that it wasn't just 6 or 7 different names to keep track of right off the bat. So yeah, she comes in the latest, but she is definitely pivotal to the story.
See, Grace was the one that had me the most intrigued. So I see when you're saying her point of view was last. Yes, I was very interested in Grace. And also the 7 deadly sins perspective definitely sheds some light. So of course, this is almost a university reunion at the same time, because it's been some time since they've all gathered together. So they've come, we see their troubles and their feelings and all the secrets coming to the surface, and we get to see exactly why are we actually here. It's also noteworthy to say someone dies. We're trying to figure that out as well. But yes, so classic thriller, classic mystery, suspense. But I think this one really stands out to me because it was super atmospheric. Now, I know you said Julius stood out to you as a character. Who do you think readers would be shocked to actually like in the end? Because they all have traits that are not flattering, to say the least.
Yeah,
Who do you think will surprise readers?
I think that is the tricky part when you're going to have a murder and then every character needs to be a reasonable suspect. Obviously, none of them can be angels for it to be believable that they might have committed murder. So, yeah, there's definitely with every book, to be honest, that I've written, there's a lot of readers always like, there's nobody here that's like super likable. And I totally get that. I have been surprised by the number of readers who have been like, oh, Julius was my favorite because to me, he's very catty and sort of snarky, but maybe that sort of he does bring a lot of humor to the group that I is sorely needed when in these serious situations. So maybe that's why people identify with him. I think too, Samira is probably like an easier go-to in terms of just she's just clearly the most like lion-hearted and just wants everyone to get along. And I think most people can relate to that. But for me personally, my favorite characters to write are the ones that are the weirdest. Like I loved writing Alfred. I loved writing Danny, who's a staff member at the hotel. I think for me, I'm always just whoever is acting the most left of center throughout the book, like that's the most fun.
Yes, you have to love a sketchy character. You also have to love a person
Mm.
who has lots of secrets, which that's me. So that's why I gravitated towards Grace.
Yeah.
Yes, Grace for me. You said you knew right off the bat you wanted to do something Hitchcock related. So it's fair to say you are a Hitchcock fan. Why Alfred Hitchcock? What is it about him that interests you that made you decide, okay, I'm going to have a hotel that's just all about him, all about his work, props, this, that, and the whole 10 yards. Where did the original idea for this novel come from? And why, again, Alfred Hitchcock?
Yeah, so it's a confluence of two things. So I first to Hitchcock actually in a college film studies class. I had a professor named Dr. Scott. So those things from the book are informed by my real life. And we watched North by Northwest. And that was the first Hitchcock movie that I watched. And he did a lot of spy thrillers. His spy movies are not necessarily my favorite. I like more of the psychological, like deep dive ones. But after that, I started to watch a lot of Hitchcock movies and have just been really into his oeuvre, I guess, ever since. So that was like in the back of my head since college. And then as I was coming up with my third book idea, I was brainstorming a lot of things. And I had noticed you mentioned Agatha Christie, that tons of thriller writers have been paying homage to her with their work recently. And I was like, who's another like kind of master of the genre that I could pay homage to? And Hitchcock was someone that immediately came to mind. The other person that I played with or I considered was Poe. But I ended up going with Hitchcock. Just I felt like there was so much material to work with there. And yeah, it gave me an excuse to dive even deeper into his filmography. Like I had seen all of the greatest hits, but not some of the way further back ones. So it was really cool to get to learn more about him as a man and all of his strengths and flaws and weaknesses, which there were many. Then also get to see his movies. And then it provided this really interesting puzzle because I really wanted to incorporate a lot of the motifs and themes and like kind of trivia and stuff. So it put like interesting, I don't know, like an interesting container over certain things, which was fun.
That makes sense. And yes, I've been seeing so many Agatha Christie nods, novels that are nods to hers, retellings of hers, inspired by hers. And I'm a big Christie fan. So yes, but I do really enjoy a good Alfred Hitchcock movie. So it was very interesting to see your book just being basically a nod to him, yes, but just having a hotel that's dedicated to everything he does was actually very lovely to see and read. On that note, you've written two previous books. So your first one, Darling Rose Gold, like you said at the top, both your books came out during the pandemic. This one was right smack dead in the middle of it because this was a 2020 read, yeah. Darling Rose Gold. I remember that. And then you followed up with This Might Hurt. So for our listeners who are not familiar, could you just share briefly about what Darling Rose Gold is about and also This Might Hurt?
Sure. So Darling Rose Gold is about a mother and daughter named Patty and Rose Gold Watts. And the book begins with Patty getting out of prison. She's just served 5 years for child abuse. Her daughter, now a grown up in her early 20s, Rose Gold, goes and picks her up. And we're wondering, why is this who has presumably been abused by this woman? Why is she inviting her back into her life? Why is she taking care of her? The two go on to move back into the childhood home that Rose Gold grew up in. And then again, chaos ensues as before with the Hitchcock Hotel. So it's a story about Munchausen by proxy, if readers are familiar with that, where caregivers fake or induce an illness in the person they're caring for, typically their children. I really just wanted to get into the mind of, do people do this? Do they know they're doing something wrong? Do they honestly think they're doing what's best for their children? So that's Darling Rose Gold. That was my debut. And This Might Hurt. That is a story about a woman who goes off to this private island in Maine where this fearlessness retreat called Wisewood exists. And there at Wisewood, there are these 6-month stays where there's no contact allowed with the outside world, no cell phones, no TV, no internet. And it's all about trying to achieve fearlessness. And Kit, the woman who goes off to Wisewood, she has a sister named Natalie back at home in Boston. And Natalie this is a cult. I need to, when the 6 months are up and she doesn't hear from Kit, I gotta go check this place out, figure out what's going on. So the story is told from 3 different points of view, Natalie, Kit, and then this other third character. And it's all about Natalie trying to bring her sister home.
Yes. So now I really want to know from your point of view, what do you think are the similarities, but also differences between your 3 books? Because again, we have Darling Rose Gold, This Might Hurt, and now the Hitchcock Hotel.
Yeah, so I think the Hitchcock Hotel has actually deviated the most from, I guess, the 3 books that I've written. So the first 2, I think, are much more classic psychological thrillers. In the first one, it's 2 points of view, and the second one, it's 3. So we do much more of a psychological deep dive. Whereas with the Hitchcock Hotel, it starts out as one genre, which you think is like a psych thriller, but then it turns into a murder mystery. I don't think it's giving too much away to say that. And so of how many points of view there are, 7, like I said, you can't do as deep of a character dive into all of these people, or the book would be 500 pages. And it's also the most plot oriented book. This is the most like twists and turns and puzzle pieces. And so it was a very different challenge than the first 2, which the first 2 were more like, why do people join cults? Why do people start them? Why do people hurt their children? You know what I mean? This one was more kind of figuring out the mechanics of how to write a whodunit, basically, which I had never done before. So it was definitely a new craft challenge. I don't know if I'll ever write 7 POVs again, but hopefully it all came together in the end.
Came together in the end. And when you really mention it now, yes, 7 points of view it's a lot. However, it worked. And I think it worked for sure in this novel because I wanted to hear from all of them. And that's for certain.
Thank you.
So with that said, you have these 3. Are you working on a 4th? Is there another book in the works? Can you share anything?
Yes, I am working on my 4th. I can't really say too much what it's about yet, but it will probably come out in 2026. And it is back to a smaller cast of characters. It is just two POVs, and it takes place over the course of a Christmas dinner.
Christmas, so is this going to be like holiday themed?
I mean, not in the sense of, ooh, now we all feel festive. You know what I mean? Like, it's definitely a dark novel. So merry, we'll put it that way.
Okay, not merry. We can work with that. Okay, awesome. All right. So I'd love to get some book recommendations from you. Tell us about the last book or books that you finished reading that you'd now recommend.
Sure. So my favorite book that I've read this year is We Begin at the End by Chris Whitaker, which is a few years old now, but my TBR is just overflowing like everyone. So I finally got to it. I just absolutely loved this book. It reminded me in some ways of Demon Copperhead in terms of both teenage characters being these like sassy, down on their luck, keep making bad decisions, but like ultimately heart of gold type people. And the fact that somebody doesn't die in this book until 70, 100 pages in, and yet you're still just riveted for those first 100 pages it's so hard to accomplish as an author. So I totally admire Whitaker for that. And I think because it's more of a literary thriller, I wasn't really expecting as many twists and turns, but there are 2 very good ones at the end. So it's a book like 5 out of 5 stars. Can't recommend it highly enough.
That, and yes, Chris Whitaker does something. I say it's some magic because he can write a long book, but you're so engrossed and so engaged, and you'll still be turning the pages. Yeah. What childhood book can you remember that you just absolutely loved, that you were captivated by, and maybe you reread a few times?
Oh, I'm not much of a rereader, to be honest, but I will say, and I also have a garbage memory. So anytime I get questions about childhood, I'm like, but I will say I went through a serious horse phase as a kid. And so I remember, I don't know if you remember the Thoroughbred series, but there were like, I don't know, probably 100 of them or something. And they're just like all this like horse series basically. And like the Babysitter's Club, which was another favorite where it was just the same cast and then it switched it up. I just loved series like that, and Nancy Drew, which maybe isn't that surprising. So yeah, more than I can't really remember any one specific book, but I can remember the series that I would spend like a whole summer or a whole year just like blowing through.
Yeah, I love that. We also love indie bookstores here, so share with our listeners some of your favorite local indies. And will you be visiting any on your tour?
Yes. So I will be stopping in a few cities: New York, Chicago, Scottsdale, Houston, and LA, Minneapolis. Sorry, that was like all out of order. But favorite indies, I'm going to say a few in the Chicago suburbs because that's where I grew up. On the North Shore, I really love Lake Forest Bookstore. The booksellers there are so wonderful, and the bookstore itself is just gorgeous. And more on like the western suburbs of Southwest where I grew up, I really love Anderson's, which has locations in Naperville and Downers Grove. And I'll actually be going to the location in Downers Grove on the day the book comes out, September 24th.
Awesome. And Stephanie has a really great website and it's updated with where she'll be and when. So visit stephanieWrobel.com to get dates. So getting back to the Hitchcock Hotel, again, I know you've done your job, you've written the book, it's done. But what are you hoping readers might think or feel, or maybe want to call up their friend and say, oh my gosh, hey, after they've turned the last page?
Like I said, I did a lot of research into Hitchcock for this book, and he used to say other films are slices of life, but mine are a slice of cake. It was all about entertaining the viewer. And he didn't like to think of it as like high art, or he didn't like necessarily want them to be critiqued and analyzed for theme or whatever. And so I think that's what this book is about more than anything. Is I hope that it's a ton of fun and it's a diversion from just some of the monotonies of daily life. I want it to be very escapist fiction because I think that's the best way to pay homage to this like great director.
Yep, I couldn't agree with you more. This is a wonderful escape. It's perfect for the fall, I feel. Perfect timing with this one. So listeners, I hope you'll pick up a copy of The Hitchcock Hotel. Stephanie, thanks for coming on the couch and speaking with me. This has been fun.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Reader's Couch podcast. Please subscribe to the show, share it with a friend, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Until next time, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks again for listening, and happy reading.